3:45 till then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, stay at home unless you can't. As if a Delta outbreak and level 4 lockdown isn't enough, torrential rain and flooding forces some West Aucklanders to evacuate. At midnight tonight, Aotearoa gets a new border, cutting it in two. Everyone south of Auckland moves to level 3, but spare a thought for the Waikato residents about to become honorary Jaffas. We talk to the mayor, whose territory is being annexed, and police monitoring the roadblocks. More than 100 prison guards and inmates are isolated and segregated after one of them tests positive for COVID. And a morsel of good news. Wellington is salivating at the thought of level 3 takeaways.
Ahi Marie, RNZ News at 5, ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. Clean-up efforts are underway in West Auckland after flooding wreaked havoc in some suburbs. The Auckland Mayor says there are families who may not be able to return home until repair work is done. Katie Doyle reports.
Residents in some of the worst affected areas were out today surveying damage. Police are now actively patrolling suburbs affected by floodwaters. They say anyone who feels unsafe or that their property is in danger is urged to phone 111. The Mayor, Phil Goff, says up to 60 homes have been evacuated and help will be available for families needing accommodation. He says the suburb of Kumeu received around 200 millimetres of rain in a day, which is more than what would normally occur in the entire month of August.
Meanwhile, a Piha resident says the cloudburst over the west coast caused rivers and streams to rise frighteningly fast. Willie Beggs says he and others drove door to door checking on neighbours as the waters rose.
Just making people aware, and then it really started coming up. You know, it must have risen almost 2 metres in 20 minutes, it seemed. So it's pretty scary.
The Insurance Council is reminding anyone affected by the flooding in Auckland that the industry is an essential service. Its Chief Executive Tim Grafton says insurers are able to work and make repairs during Alert Level 4. The Prime Minister is cautioning people that social events or other get-togethers should not happen under Level 3. From 11:59pm tonight, everywhere south of Auckland moves to Alert Level 3, and Level 3 means people should still work from home if possible, and schools are closed for all children apart from those of essential workers. Jacinda Ardern says the risk of COVID is still high.
Stay at home. Keep your bubbles small and exercise and shop locally. Keep your distance from people. Delta is highly infectious. Continue working from home if possible and keep children and young people at home with you.
Jacinda Ardern says a few more businesses can open under Level 3, including those offering contactless delivery and pickup. Meanwhile, there may be a restriction on any new vaccine bookings if the country's Pfizer supply isn't boosted. Ministers are being questioned by opposition MPs this afternoon in a socially distanced and scaled-down question time at Parliament. The COVID-19 response Minister Chris Hipkins says there is a focus on honouring the current bookings in the scale-up of the vaccine rollout.
What we may have to find ourselves in the position of doing if we cannot increase supply in the next 5 or 6 weeks, we may find ourselves having to restrict ourselves to those vaccines that have been booked and scale back some of the additional capacity that's been being bought online over the last few weeks.
Chris Hipkins says another 1.6 million doses of the vaccine will be delivered in September. There are 49 new community cases of COVID-19 today, all in Auckland. Truckers are hoping for a smoother run crossing the border in and out of the Auckland region from midnight tonight. In previous lockdowns, there were big traffic delays at checkpoints. Nick Leggett from the Road Transport Forum says with only essential travel permitted, truckies may find it easier not having to compete with other vehicles. He says it's important that freight can move quickly. The government has paid out $1.25 billion in wage subsidies and COVID-19 resurgence payments since lockdown. Ministers were questioned by opposition MPs this afternoon in a socially distanced and scaled-down question time at Parliament. A deadly oyster parasite, which was reportedly found in Foveaux Strait earlier this year, was never actually there. The Ministry for Primary Industries reported in March that 3 oysters had tested positive for Bonamia austriae in Foveaux Strait. But now Biosecurity New Zealand says human error meant the results were read incorrectly and the parasite was never present. It's 4 minutes past 5. 19 people have been arrested for flouting Alert Level 4 rules during anti-lockdown protests this morning. The police say there were small gatherings at government and local council buildings around the country. Moving now into sport, New Zealand's William Steadman has won a second Paralympic medal in less than 24 hours, finishing third in the men's T34 400 metres in Tokyo. It's a repeat of the bronze medal he won in the same event in Rio in 2016. Last night, Steadman won a silver medal in the T36 long jump and says that took a toll.
I only got probably about 4 hours sleep last night, and so I felt really tired, but the time showed that a little bit, but I'm really happy either way. I gave it absolutely everything, I had nothing left at the end of that race. That last kind of 40 metres, I was just running on empty, I'm really pleased with the effort I put in today.
Swimmer Sophie Pascoe will continue her quest for her first gold medal of these games when she contests the final of the 100 metres freestyle S9 tonight. Pascoe won her heat but was several seconds outside her best time in finishing as the third fastest qualifier. On the track, sprinter Anna Stephen is also into the final of the T64 200 metres final. Andy Murray has produced his best tennis in 4 injury-disrupted years, but fell short of beating Greek world number 3 Stefanos Tsitsipas in the first round of the US Tennis Open. The former world number 1 lost in 5 sets. But Murray, now ranked 112th in the world, was irritated by the Greeks' 8-minute bathroom break before the deciding set. And finally, New Zealand Rugby says the NPC, the Farah Palmer Cup and the Heartland Championship competitions will not be able to resume until the country is out of Alert Level 3 and 4. And that's the news.
Surprise floods sweep West Auckland.
I woke up to see flashing lights on the wall of my room. I looked to the left of my house. There's vineyards behind me. They were underwater.
Residents of Waitakere weather the storm on social media.
The community Facebook page is lit up and everybody sort of bandied together.
As rocks and debris force some road closures.
It's certainly treacherous driving conditions out there, some small slips across roads.
Keeping you afloat, Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, on air, online and on demand. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland, isolated showers, rain gradually spreading north this afternoon with some heavy and possibly thundery falls. For Auckland and Coromandel, showers easing this afternoon, partly cloudy with isolated showers tomorrow. For Waikato, Waitomo, Taumaranui, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, scattered rain clearing this evening and fine breaks increasing. For Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape, fine. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with isolated showers. For Marlborough, fine spells increasing today and fine tomorrow. For the remainder of the South Island, mostly fine with overnight frost or fog in some places. However, a few showers about Western Fiordland turning to rain late tomorrow, with scattered falls spreading to Southland and parts of Otago from tomorrow evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and the odd shower. That concludes your short forecast from Met Service. It's now 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi Sarah, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Stay home unless you can't. As if level 4 lockdown wasn't bad enough, some West Auckland residents have been forced to flee their homes when floodwaters rushed into their houses in rows and rows. In some places, the water got to neck height, forcing people to move in with friends or other family, bursting bubbles, but just to get a roof over their heads. And as the rain clears and waters begin to subside, the clean-up has begun. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
Cars can't even get past on the main road.
As rain pounded West Auckland overnight, people like Andrew Smith braved the rain, watching on as torrents of water flowed down his Waitakere street.
Never ever seen anything like it. And the stream at the back of our property was up about 4 metres. Yeah, really high. So that's why I was worried about these guys lower down.
Andrew's one of the lucky ones. His house is safe, but the property 2 doors down was evacuated, as were up to 60 others across the region. Many fled in the night, abandoning their homes as floodwaters rose. Fire and emergency were inundated with calls, responding to 370 incidents before 10 a.m. Lifeguards also stepped up to help, rescuing residents trapped in their Kumeu homes, as more than 200 millimetres of rain fell in just 14 hours. Standing in waist-high water and using the assistance of dinghies, the team from Surf Lifesaving Northern Region had to smash the window of a shed to rescue one man from inside. Here in Kumeu, the water has affected many houses and businesses here. As you can see behind me, the water levels are still extremely high. Many businesses that we've spoken to along the road have said they've only just managed to unblock their drains and start to get rid of that water that's been rising. And in the 30 or so years that they've been here, some of these businesses say they've never seen the water reach this side of the road. It's always stayed on the other side. It was a 4 a.m. start for Johnny Mills from Bridgestone Tyres in Kumeu.
Woke up a call to the neighbour saying that the place was flooded and there was probably about 600 mil of water coming through the shop.
He didn't think the flooding would be that bad at his shop.
And we arrived here and out the front here was pretty much like a river going through, and the whole shop floor was absolutely flooded out.
The water's subsided now, but the shop's covered in silt, and Johnny's worried about the damage to his machines.
The water did come quite high, so we might be up for a bit of damage there, but it's can't really do too much about when nature does its thing. You just got to get on with it, clean up.
At Barry Auto Electrical next door, Larry's helping his friend clean up after managing to unblock the drain that's been clogged all morning.
Well, I've been here 30 odd years and this is the best one I've seen.
But his own business, a horse shop up the road, is even worse. And how's the factory?
Meter of water through it, so up to the counter. It's the worst. It hasn't flooded for, 10 or 15 years more.
With roads resembling rivers and fields more like lakes, even rescue vehicles needed rescuing. Luke Wallacott and his team were working to free a truck stuck in the water.
This morning there was some trapped people in a housing development just around the corner, and he drove through but couldn't get back through, and the water subsided another 1.5 metres above where it is now, so it was really high, and then they rescued them and then the truck drowned on the process.
In Waitakere Township, the drive-through Waipareira Vaccination Centre moved indoors to the Trust Arena. CEO John Tamahere says it was a stressful morning waking up to the damage and changing plans.
We started at 6 a.m. drawing and mixing the vaccines. By 7 a.m. the weather just made it impossible, as well as last night a lot of our infrastructure was taken out by the storm. So we then had to rebuild everything inside. So we had to hire in 450 chairs and all the rest of it.
Several of their vaccination staff were unable to come to work due to repairing their homes. Some were even evacuated. They were still planning on getting through around half the amount of vaccinations scheduled for today. With some bubbles burst, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's reminded people that emergency situations trump alert level rules.
But we are being pragmatic. Emergency situations and evacuation advice overrides alert level requirements. The most important thing is keeping people safe. If you're advised to evacuate by authorities because of an emergency, please follow that advice. And of course we understand that the situation will mean that there will be some bubbles who by necessity are joining other families simply because they need shelter.
The heavy rain warnings for Auckland have now lifted, but West Auckland residents have a mighty clean-up on their hands.
And Louise Tanuth joins us now live from just outside of Kumeu. Kia ora, Louise. What are people who have had to evacuate doing tonight?
Yeah, well, Lisa, most people we've spoken to are just facing that massive clean-up ahead. That water from the flooding has just dilapidated their homes and businesses. People we've spoken to today have got a huge job on their hands, plenty of insurance claims, I'm sure, and that'll be them for the foreseeable future with all of that water that has just come through and sodden everything.
And so what about concerns if they've had to leave their house? Are there security concerns?
Yeah, so just less than half an hour ago, there were about 5 police cars behind me on this road, Aotearoa Road, which connects Kumeu with Hunuapai, which was previously shut. It's now been drained so people can go through. But police have said not to worry for people that have had to leave their homes and businesses. They've had to evacuate, they've had to leave them unattended. Police in West Auckland will have a high police presence throughout tonight and over the coming days. So they want people to be rest assured that have had to leave everything behind.
Thanks, Louise. Louise Tanuth, who's joining us live from Kumeu there. It is 15 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere nei. Coming up on the programme, South Islanders, who among you would be prepared to wait for a COVID vaccination so Aucklanders can be given priority? Let us know your thoughts. Text us on 2101. From midnight tonight, the country will split in two, with everyone south of the Auckland border dropping down to alert level 3. Police are bringing back the checkpoints to make sure those crossing the border from tomorrow are doing so for essential business only. But for those living in the cut-off zone, they're in the position of having their neighbours in a different alert level. The boundary along 2 rural roads has some residents scratching their heads about which supermarket they're now allowed to go to. Our reporter Nick Trubridge spent the day on the southern boundary.
Welcome to the border zone. From midnight tonight, some of these people will remain in level 4. Others will enjoy slightly more freedom in level 3. I'm on Kohiroa Road, Mercer. It looks like your standard windy rural road. Except from tonight, residents here say they'll be living separate lives.
I'm level 3 and my neighbour across the road is level 4.
Meet Crystal Kedda. She lives on the southern side of Kohiroa Road, a stone's throw east of State Highway 1 at Mercer, which is where the police will set up an Auckland boundary later tonight. The government's official COVID-19 boundary map still has Crystal and her south side neighbours as being at level 3 from 11:59 tonight. And that's a problem. She'd actually rather be in level 4 so she can access the supermarket a 5-minute drive away in Pōkeno.
Yes, we'll be in level 4 lockdown for 2 more weeks, which makes me and my partner going back to work a lot longer because we can't go back to work till level 2. But on the hindsight of things, my daughter's school is in the Auckland bubble, so, you know, I'd rather be on the same level as her anyway.
The map shows Maxine Calder, who lives across the road from Miss Kedda, will remain in lockdown.
This side's level 4, that side's level 3. So we're basically in Puki end and they've got to go the other side. So once they get to the bridge, they've got to go down south. For groceries, essentials basically, yeah.
From Mercer, the Auckland COVID boundary follows the Waikato River south. About 15 minutes down State Highway 1, the boundary deviates west along another rural road where neighbours are also effectively split in two. I'm standing on Glen Murray Road, about 15 minutes southwest of Mercer. It certainly has the look and feel of rural Waikato. Vast, lush green paddocks, animals grazing, and a stock truck's just driven past me. Fact is, it's closer to Hamilton's CBD than Auckland's. But when it comes to COVID alert levels, one side of Glen Murray Road is considered Auckland, and the other Waikato. I drop in on Glen Murray resident Kristen Mitchell. Her family will stay at level 4 tonight. That's not a huge issue at the moment, but it could be if her family goes to level 3 and the neighbours on the other side go to level 2.
We discovered that on our side of the road was Auckland and the other side of the road was Waikato. So in that case, to follow the rules by the letter, the kids would not go to school in Te Kowhara. So our kids stayed home. We consulted the school about it, and our kids stayed home on lockdown, and the kids on the other side of the road had gone to school.
But Kristen is pretty relaxed about the problem. Daughter Ruby, on the other hand,
I miss my friends when I can't see them. I don't like that the neighbours' kids can catch a bus from the end of our driveway because it's unsafe for them to catch it from theirs, and we still can't go down to the end of our driveway because that's crossing the border. That feels a little stupid to me.
Last lockdown, as she was confined to the property, she could see her mates on their way to class.
If I walked to the top of the hill, I could see the neighbours' kids who are in level 2, and I'm still stuck in level 3 with Auckland as a resident of the Waikato, I guess.
For now, at level 4, it's Netflix and FaceTime.
I watched a couple of movies last night. I also watched 14 seasons of a show called Heartland, which wasted quite a lot of my time. Get me quite entertained.
And with 2 more weeks of level 4, then who knows how long at level 3, Ruby in lockdown land may get through a few series yet.
And Nick Trubridge joins us live from the border zone. Nick, explain to us which side you're on.
Yeah, so I'm on the northern side of the boundary, Lisa, and for those who can't see this, I'm standing about 200 metres away from that Mercer roadblock. Police are starting to set it up now. There's a few flashing lights I can see whizzing past me, but if you come with me for a second, now I'm standing on the driveway of a house on the northern side. This is on level 4 territory. The people here, they're still in lockdown at 11:59 tonight. But if we go just a little bit across the road, I'm now walking across that road that was mentioned in my package. Just make sure there's no cars coming so cameraman Nick doesn't get run over. I'm now on level 3 land. It would be about a 20 metre walk rather across the road. I'm now on level 3 land. As it stands currently, according to the government's COVID website, these people can't go to their normal supermarket. They have to go south to Huntly, and that won't change. Well, it won't change unless DPMC decide to change it. So we're waiting to hear from them.
Interesting, Nick, because I did count your steps as you were wobbling across the road there, and it was 21 steps I counted. So 21 steps between level 4 on one side of the road, so they're now honorary Aucklanders, and then the others are in level 3. So do people have much confidence that this is going to run smoothly?
Well, that's a great question. It was just while I've got you on that, Lisa, it was about 21 steps. And one thing I will add is these two could literally sit on each other's porches and throw stones through the opposite window if they wanted to. Is it going to run smoothly? Well, that's a great question. It's probably okay while people are still in lockdown. We know that 3 and 4 are still effectively lockdowns. As you heard in my package, the issue could come in when we go to 3 on one side and 2 on the other. I would be on 2, where I'm standing right now, just to remind people that's the southern side of the road just off the Mercer roadblock. And my kids, for example, would be allowed to go to school. Now, if we pan back round, for argument's sake, we're now facing north, we would be in level 3. My kids on this side wouldn't be able to go to school. So there could be some growing pains when the levels start to keep stepping down.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. Thanks for that. That's Nick Trubridge, who's joined us from the border there, literally right on the border, and only a few steps between the 2 different levels. The police will be screening people at those roadblocks on the Auckland border, and Superintendent Shannon Gray joins us live. Good evening, Superintendent. What's the plan for policing the border?
Hi, Lisa. How are you? Well, the plan is very similar to the previous checkpoints that we've had in place. Obviously starting at 11:59 p.m. tonight, we move into alert level 4 for Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau and Northland, and of course the rest of the country is in level 3. So that means that we are in the process of setting up 5 checkpoints across the southern border of Tamaki Makaurau. And absolutely the purpose is to check to make sure people are travelling for essential purposes.
Okay, well, talk me through it. Let's have a scenario here. I'm chugging along. Let's say I'm in a Prius. Don't hold that against me. I roll up to your checkpoint, right? Yes. What do I need to have? What happens when I'm stopped?
So the first thing, obviously, is engage with our officer that's on the checkpoint. And what we would need from you to start with would be some photo ID, would be really, really helpful, so we know that we're actually talking to Lisa and not someone else. Also, there's a couple of things. So you could have a permitted exemption under the health order to travel through due to Lifeline industry or something along those lines. or you could have had an exemption issued by MB, which we would scan and confirm it's actually a true and correct version of that exemption notice, and then would wave you on your way. Now, if you couldn't provide any of that and you had other what you believed essential reasons for travelling, we'd have a conversation with you and try and establish whether they were, I suppose, legitimate or not. Once we could ascertain that, obviously we would send you on your way. Otherwise, if we can't evidence any of that, unfortunately, we'd be turning you around.
Yeah, so how lenient are you going to be this time or not?
We're not going to be lenient. We're going to obviously still educate people where we're turning them around. We don't want to move to enforcing people who are trying to push through the borders, but obviously, if it's absolutely blatant, then maybe we need to go down that path. But our initial approach will be to educate people, make sure they know where they can get this information, and that's probably something I'd really reinforce for people is before you get in your car, before you even leave the house, have a look at the COVID-19 website and make sure that you are actually able to travel and fitting within those essential service type categories that we're expecting.
Superintendent, there's some sort of quirks, really, and we just heard from our reporter down there at the Mercer border where literally one house, 20 steps from another house, is in Auckland and the other ones are considered to be in Waikato, so they'll move to level 2. I mean, is that going to create some difficulty for your people trying to vet people coming and going?
Look, that has always presented challenges for us within this checkpoint type situation, and look, the health order tells us where the boundary basically lies, and we try and set our checkpoints up in locations that both align with that health order, but also taking into consideration safety for our people. So they're locations where we can move traffic freely, we can turn traffic around, etc. Now, unfortunately, as everyone will appreciate, the line will run down the middle of the road somewhere. And so, particularly with the Delta variant, what we want to do is probably err on the side of caution and say, look, if the line runs down the middle of the road, our people will be initially instructed to deal with people as if they're in alert level 4, and then we would look at individual circumstances past that.
Some quick things because we're running out of time. Is there going to be a separate lane for freight or people with stock?
Yes, absolutely. So as on our major checkpoints, the likes of Mercer, State Highway 1, etc., we always try and run a freight lane. That means that stuff can continue on its way, and it's really only people in private vehicles or smaller vehicles, trade, etc., that we funnel off the motorway and through our checkpoint.
How much resource is going into this? Because it must be a resource sucker.
Yes, she is. It's a big operation. So to talk in round numbers, it takes about 140 staff over a 24-hour period to run these checkpoints. So when we sort of push that out to making sure our staff are rested, etc., it's about 210 staff in total to keep the checkpoints running in the south alone. We lose count of the number of portaloos, the number of meals, the lighting equipment, all the PPE equipment and everything that goes along with it. So, look, we've been here before. We've proven that we can do this really well, and we've certainly got this, Lisa, but it takes a lot of work.
Really appreciate your time. Best of luck. That is Superintendent Shannon Gray. And that border becomes a hard border at 11:59pm tonight. It is 27 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira ānei nā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. Are you affected by the border or the location of it? What do you make of the setup? Pātui mai, text me on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send an email. checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is the address. A Tūrangi woman says she wrote to the Prime Minister and the Minister for Corrections, Calvin Davis, a week ago, raising concerns about inmates being transferred between prisons during level 4 lockdown. It comes amid revelations a corrections officer at Spring Hill Prison is infected with the virus after returning a positive test on Monday. Corrections says 23 staff are now isolating and 123 inmates are being segregated and tested. But a Tūrangi local, who has asked to be called Sally, says a number of prisoners were transferred over a period of 2 days between Spring Hill and Tongariro prisons. Now, Sally joins us now live. Sally, tell me about what was worrying you.
Yeah, hi Lisa. Well, my biggest concern was that I have whānau and friends as inmates in Tongariro prison, as well as staff and the local community. And as soon as I heard that prisoners were being transferred, at the time I didn't know specifically it was going to be Spring Hill or Auckland. They were the two options. And I just felt that it was an unseemly time to be transferring anybody from anywhere.
And why? What's your biggest fear here?
Well, we're in level 4 lockdown, for starters, and if we cannot go very far, I don't see why correction have the realm to be able to do that themselves and transfer prisoners when, if COVID happens to get into one of our facilities, then there's a lot of trouble. And I was concerned enough to reach out to Kelvin and Jacinda and our local mayor, David, who has done the best he can when he gets stymied at every turn. But, I just thought it was a bad idea.
So what response did you get from the Prime Minister, and how long ago did you raise it with her?
This was a week ago. I raised it initially with Kelvin and got the automated response. Then I raised it with Jacinda and got the automated response, but then I got another response when I forwarded what I'd already sent to Kelvin Davis, and she responded saying she'd forwarded it on to him, and I got a response from him saying because of his inability to, operational systems or something, that he couldn't do anything. So then I received a response from Corrections confirming that they had moved 24 prisoners over those 2-day period a week ago from Spring Hill to Tongariro. And I was concerned about the procedures involved in their movement purely because of the impact it could have on our community, the prisoners and the staff.
And Sally, is that because obviously Auckland and the region, the greater region of Auckland, is a hotspot at the moment in this Delta outbreak?
Well, mainly my initial reach out to the powers that be was because I was unsure whether these prisoners were being moved from Spring Hill or Auckland. I've since verified that they were from Spring Hill and not coming from Auckland, but it was mainly hearing Auckland in the background that gave me concern.
So now that there is a confirmed case for a prison officer at Spring Hill, and we know that person was at work over the weekend, what are you hearing from inside Tongariro? Are people concerned?
They are not so much. I haven't actually spoken to anybody today regarding the latest revelation that came out from Dr. Bloomfield at today's press meeting. But the reaction would probably not be great. I will have more knowledge about this tomorrow when I've spoken to a few people, but as of now I'm not sure. But those men were not segregated that arrived from Spring Hill for 14 days. They were not separately isolated. They are actually in other units at present.
So
I think
Sally,
that is of great concern.
So Sally, just to be clear, is it your understanding that the prisoners who were transferred from Spring Hill were mixed in with the other general population?
I know as of just a few days ago, they are in some of the units that they weren't put into the new wing and kept there for 14 days. They are now actually in other units at that prison.
So other units with other prisoners, you mean?
Yes.
So now that you're aware of this positive case, I mean, how worried are you?
Extremely. I won't be going to the supermarket again.
And what do you think about the way authorities have handled your concerns and the transfers here?
I think it was, they were unjustified, and fair call to the parliamentarians and the Prime Minister, because they are unaware of the procedures that corrections do. And I think they should be requiring permissions from the powers that be rather than them finding out from Joe Citizen.
Sally, really appreciate your time this evening. That is Sally, who's pretty concerned about, she says, transfers from Spring Hill Prison to Tongariro prisons. Now, we have asked the Corrections Department to come on the program this evening. We'll keep you posted. The invitation still stands. Kia ora, e te iwi e haere aki nei i a checkpoint. The Waikato mayor with part of his district swallowed up by Auckland and alert level 4. Police investigating the discovery of a baby girl's body at a recycling centre. And what's on the menu as Wellington salivates at the thought of level 3 takeaways. Homai o whakaro, we would love to hear feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening, the alert levels or the transfer of prisoners, it seems, during alert level 4 too. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines. Ane a Sarah mena pita pita kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. RNZ News headlines. Ko Sarah Thompson tōku ingoa. Clean-up efforts are underway in West Auckland after flooding wreaked havoc. Auckland Mayor Phil Goff says there are families who may not be able to return home until repair work is done. Up to 60 homes have been evacuated. Police say they will have a high presence in the area with patrols overnight. They urge anyone who feels unsafe or feels their property is in danger to phone 111. Meanwhile, a Piha resident says the cloudburst over the west coast caused rivers and streams to rise frighteningly fast. Willie Beggs says he and others drove door to door checking on neighbours as the waters rose. More businesses can open under level 3, but under new rules for the Delta variant, all staff and customers must wear masks when they are buying goods. From 11:59pm tonight, everywhere south of Auckland moves to level 3. Northland moves from Friday morning. Truckers are hoping for a smoother run crossing the border in and out of the Auckland region from midnight tonight. In previous lockdowns, there were big traffic delays at checkpoints. Police Superintendent Shannon Gray told Checkpoint officers will be checking motorists are travelling for essential reasons. He says they will try to run a freight lane. Just over 50 community cases of COVID-19 are still to be epidemiologically linked to the Auckland outbreak. 49 new community infections have been reported today. A last-minute legal bid by a group of Afghans trapped in Kabul has been turned down by the High Court. The group has applied for an urgent injunction, asking the court to rule on Immigration New Zealand's decision to stop processing visas. And finally, police are investigating the discovery of a baby's body at an Auckland recycling plant and are reviewing CCTV footage from about 100 trucks to see how it ended up there. The baby girl was found just over 2 weeks ago at the Onehunga plant, and police have yet to identify her or her mother. Those are your headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Kia ora rā e hono mai hoki mai. If you're just joining me, this is Checkpoint ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa I nei ko Nona Peltier to talk business. Nona, the High Court has imposed a penalty of $3.5 million, which is pretty hefty, on the TSB Bank for breaches of anti-money laundering rules. So what's behind that?
Yeah, the Reserve Bank brought the action after the TSB basically failed to respond to an investigation it had done earlier. It said that the shortcomings that they had identified stretched back to 2016, and they weren't satisfied, this is the Reserve Bank, that the TSB had addressed those issues. So they took the action. TSB says they have since addressed those issues, but, we're disappointed that of the fine and so on. So certainly that's something the Reserve Bank is keeping an eye on.
And Nona, a survey of real estate agents suggests that house prices are continuing to climb. What is thought to be behind the price pressure?
Now, this is a survey by the Real Estate Institute and Tony Alexander real estate survey. So that's an economist. Look, they surveyed 325 agents after, the last week of August. So that's after the lockdown. And what the agents have said is that about net 59%, so very little change from earlier, are saying that prices are still rising. And Lisa, it's the old story, the fear of missing out that they feel is the reason why prices keep going. In addition, of course, to the supply shortage shortage that we find. So what's going to happen is anyone's guess, but when we do finally come out of this lockdown, it'll be interesting to see whether or not people are still fearful of the prices moving out of their reach.
And Nona, what numbers do you bring from the market today?
Yeah, well, look, the top 50 index rose about 1/3%, up 38 points to 13,219. And that's really during a time when the Asian stocks had opened up lower because of the worries about China's slowing economic growth and regulatory changes. And, of course, the old story about Delta. And the U.S. dollar, well, it fell. And as a result of that, the New Zealand dollar is currently trading at 70.3 U.S. cents, 96.2 Australian and 51 pence. So pretty strong numbers there.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business News. Phil Goff's renewed calls for Aucklanders to be given priority to the COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccine is in hot demand and the government's admitted the current supply can't sustain that demand. The Prime Minister says an announcement's coming on how the government plans to deal with the upswing in demand. Our reporter Conan Young and cameraman Nathan McKinnon asked the good people of Christchurch how willing they'd be to wait a little bit longer for their vaccine if Aucklanders became the priority.
Amongst those getting their daily exercise in Hagley Park as COVID-free Christchurch prepares to move to level 3 tomorrow is Caitlin Manson. With just 2 weeks to go before she gets her first jab, she's not keen to share.
This Delta variant spreads like fire, so I'd rather keep myself safe first. Maybe selfish, but I don't know, thinking of myself.
And if somebody said to you, hey, look, if there was an Aucklander here today and they said, hey, look, we've got, 80 cases a day, we do need the vaccine, maybe a little bit more than the South Island where there haven't been any cases, what would you say to them?
I don't know, wait your turn. Like, I understand they're in a shit... Oh. a really, unpredictable time, but, we've all got to wait for it. Some will have to wait for it longer than others.
Perhaps, we might need to start sending some from the South Island where we don't have any COVID, obviously, up to the North Island to help them out there. What do you think about that?
I'm hopeful that it doesn't come to that. I'm hopeful that we have we can access resources elsewhere. But if the numbers keep increasing and if there is a need, I think yes, because we don't have COVID in the South Island at the moment, yes, I think we could probably redistribute those vaccines.
Right, and it's a bit of a personal question, but have you managed to get yourself a booking yet? Or?
Yes, I've had my first shot, as have all my family.
Great.
Apart from 2 in Auckland.
Right. Well, there you go, so it's quite personal for you.
Yes, it is, and they've got a young baby, so that's why I would certainly consider that.
What do you think of this plea, I guess, from the Auckland Mayor for them to be given priority for the vaccine?
I'm all for helping people when they really need it. I really am. But I think that there are people in Christchurch who haven't received the vaccine yet who actually need it. There's just been too many cases of old people who have not been contacted. The rollout has not had any effect for them. And families have had to step up and go, oh, look, my parents are in their 80s or 90s and need a vaccine. So if all of those people are taken care of, then of course we should help people in Auckland. I've got no problem with that. I just feel so sorry. I've got family up there myself and I feel desperate for them.
For you want to see those vulnerable groups in Christchurch and the South Island taken care of first?
I want to see the elderly vaccinated. I want to see the vulnerable, autoimmune compromised, and most importantly, MIQ workers. Please, for the love of God, could they have 2 vaccines?
Yeah, absolutely. Until we've done that, everybody else unfortunately has to wait, you think?
Yeah, they do.
What do you make of this call from the Auckland Mayor for them to be given priority for the vaccine?
Oh, look, as I say, traditionally South Islanders and North Islanders, especially Aucklanders, we're pretty competitive. But I think in this situation, at the end of the day, we're all Kiwis, so let's look after them.
And can I ask, have you managed to get yourself a booking, or?
I must admit, no, I haven't.
So you seriously would be giving up your own vaccination for somebody in Auckland if we did do this?
As I say, I don't have an issue with that. I think New Zealand's always been a country where we've always been a team of 5 million. When you look at our sports people and that, we're just it's something in our DNA, I think, that, we all stick together. All for one for all.
It is almost 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki na pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, Auckland businesses are pleading for more financial help as they brace for at least another 2 weeks at level 4. More than 100 prison guards and inmates are isolating after a COVID case linked to Spring Hill Jail. Last night, Corrections was told an officer had tested positive after being at a location of interest. They worked at the prison on Saturday. 123 inmates who may have had contact with the case are now being segregated and tested. 23 staff are also stood down. But it turns out some inmates have recently been transferred out of the affected unit to other jails. Now, that's before the COVID case came to light, but it's also despite concerns being raised with Corrections about prisoners being transferred at alert level 4. Well, joining me now is the President of the Corrections Association, Alan Whitley. Hi, Alan.
Hey, evening.
How worried are you about this? I mean, a confined space, vulnerable population and an already stretched workforce. How bad is the scenario here?
Oh, look, yeah, it's concerning. It's not the first time that we've had COVID in the prison, though. We had a prisoner that had COVID-19 during the last outbreak in Auckland Women's, and there was no full-on outscale breakout in Auckland Women's. The PPE and procedures we had in place kept us safe then, and we're hoping they're going to keep us safe now.
So what does the 23 staff stood down, how difficult does that make running the prison? Does that leave you short?
Yeah, it's going to leave them short. They're going to have a look at revamping their rosters and shutting down some activities to make sure that they can continue to run with a safe amount of staff. But the units will be running on a restricted regime now in the level 4 anyhow.
So what does that mean? Prisoners won't get time out of their cells?
They'll get a little bit less time out of their cells than they would normally.
Have corrections officers and the staff, have they been working in bubbles?
They try as best as they can to keep them to the bubbles, but depending on the absences on the day and the movements in the prison, sometimes there is some contamination between the units or people working in one unit and then into another unit.
Right, and is that not avoidable?
No, it's not avoidable with the numbers that we've got.
You mean you're too short of people in order to operate completely separate bubbles?
Yeah, not only just at Spring Hill, at all of our prisons.
Okay. There's been concern raised tonight that prisoners were being transferred out of Spring Hill at alert level 4. Do you know if prisoner transfers are still happening at alert level 4, and do you have any concerns about that?
I know some prisoner escorts took place under alert level 4 to free up beds. Some of those beds that were freed up were at Spring Hill so that they could take remand prisoners that came in and also manage their isolation units and quarantine units if they needed to do so. I'm not aware of any prisoners that are moving out of Spring Hill at this point in time, but there could be other movements taking place around the country if we're having bed shortages.
Are you comfortable with that, given how contagious Delta is, and given, obviously, prison is a confined space, people can't go anywhere, and if it were to get into one of the jails, it wouldn't be great?
No, it wouldn't be great if it got into one of the prisons, but a good number of the prison population is a stable population. They would have been in prison for more than 14 days, and when they're moved to a new prison, they're put in an isolation unit for a further 14 days to monitor them, and they operate them in those units in bubbles, so the prisoners that come in together get out together. All prisoners now coming into prison are tested for COVID-19 on arrival.
Are you absolutely positive, Alan, that staffing and resources means that any prisoners transferred are kept separate for a full 14 days? And what does kept separate mean?
So kept separate means that the unit that they've set up for the isolation, they go into there. If you get 5 or 6 prisoners coming in on one particular day, they are managed. When they come out of their cells, they're managed in that group, put back into their cells, and the next group of prisoners are managed in the same way. I'm confident that we've got the numbers there to do that at the moment.
So the prisoners being transferred, if the system works correctly, they should be never mixing with other inmates in that first 14 days and should never be unlocked at the same time as other prisoners. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yep, that's what should be happening.
Okay, so a situation where we've got in Spring Hill, where you've now got 123 prisoners in the unit.
Yep.
Segregated. What does that look like, and how does everyday life in the prison change? And I understand that the prisoners are being asked to wear PPE as well.
Yes, the prisoners are being asked to wear PPE in that unit. The life in that unit for those prisoners is going to be a lot different than it was yesterday or the day before. They are going to be let out in smaller groups. No corrections are seeking information from the DHB. Given it's a stable population, they haven't had many movements in and out of that unit. Of what size of a grouping can they get out? All of that's going to be determined within the next day or so.
And so in terms of PPE, what are the prisoners being asked to use?
I believe it's just a mask.
Just a mask. What about staff? Because obviously prison officers are still going to have to interact with the inmates in some capacity.
Yeah, so the staff in that unit are going to be wearing the masks, gloves, it's like a plastic coat and eye protection.
And minimal contact?
The minimal contact that they can do to get by to do their job. So we've got to feed out prisoners. There's certain things that we do need to do, get them in the cell and out of the cell. That's still got to take place.
So, Alan, is the person who is positive for COVID, is that one of your members? And if so, how are they doing?
Yeah, look, I haven't chased up whether they're a union member or not at this point in time, trying to give them a bit of privacy. We'll do that over the next couple of days. Or we have got members that have been stood down. They've been in contact with me to let me know, and our advice to them is just keep yourself safe, follow the district health board guidelines, and keep in touch with us if you need anything.
Thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. That is the President of the Corrections Association, Alan Whitley. Now, the Minister for Corrections, Calvin Davis, declined to be interviewed, but says in a statement he thanks the infected staff member for their vigilance in getting tested. He says Corrections has been planning for this possibility for some time, and he says he has full confidence that their thorough plans will limit any spread of the virus within the prison. As we say, we've invited Corrections on the program. As yet, they don't appear to have taken up that invitation, but it still stands, and we've got about 40 minutes when they could come on. The daily COVID case count has taken another slide today. 49 infections have been reported in the last 24 hours, the lowest number in 6 days. Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, says it's a promising sign.
Based on our updated modelling, the reproduction rate of the virus in this outbreak is now looking like it is remaining under 1, which means cases will continue to decline and we are successfully breaking chains of transmission.
Of the current cases, 33 people are in hospital, 8 of these are in ICU, and of those, 2 are on a ventilator.
These hospitalisations obviously have an outward ripple effect on our communities and whānau, and my thoughts are with those individuals and their whānau. It's also sobering that of the current Auckland outbreak, 6 cases are under the age of 1. All this information reinforces the importance of us doing everything we can to stamp out the virus.
The youngest person in hospital is an 18-year-old, and 2/3 of the current cases are under the age of 34. As well as that, there are 6 babies, all under a year old, who have COVID. Police investigating the discovery of a baby girl's body at an Auckland recycling facility are scouring CCTV footage for the movement of around 100 trucks to find out how she ended up there. The baby's body was discovered on Monday the 16th of August alongside some clothes and a blue plastic bag. Police have released images of those items as part of their investigation. Detective Inspector Scott Beard told our reporter Nita Blake-Person around a dozen people have passed on information which is now being investigated. A warning, some may find the details of this distressing.
At this stage, we're not able to pinpoint the exact area or route where that baby came from. There's been over 100 trucks come into that recycling plant on that Monday. And so we're doing a whole lot of work around all those trucks, and obviously the trucks towards the end of the day, which is relevant to possibly when that baby arrived at the recycling plant.
How was she actually discovered? Was it her clothing or something? And did a staff member just see something that they thought didn't seem right?
No, initially a staff member thought it might have been a doll, but on closer inspection, saw that it was actually a deceased baby.
I imagine that's a pretty harrowing find.
Absolutely. You know, if you think it's a doll and it turns out to be actually a human being, as in a newborn baby, it'd be horrific to find.
Through your inquiries, have you established a cause of death so far?
No, we've had a post-mortem. While there's still testing and toxicology results being sought, we don't have a cause of death. What we know is we have a newborn baby girl who does not appear to have been born in a medical centre or hospital.
So it sounds like there's a lot of unknowns still. What are your next steps? Where can you go from here?
Well, obviously, we're having to look at the recycling plant and the trucks that come into that plant, look at the CCTV that's there, and that's taken some time with over 100 trucks coming in that day. But obviously, we're having to prioritise around the timing of those trucks and then work out the routes where, their pickups have been that day. And then, of course, the possibility that the blue bag is linked. But as I say, that's not 100%.
Have you been frustrated by the lack of information so far?
Look, it could well be that it's a very young mother. There could be embarrassment. There could be cultural issues as to why we haven't seen, the baby hasn't been born in a maternity ward. And it's been hidden from us. And, there's a variety of reasons. We've got to keep an open mind here. But, what we want is obviously if there's a mother, and particularly if it's a young mother in that situation, she'll need some support and help. And that's the first priority. Because at the end of the day, we have a baby girl with no name. There's no love for her. And how can people really pay respects at a time of death and a funeral?
What would be your message to that mother if she's out there?
Look, if the mother or someone within her close family or friends are aware and know the situation, even if you don't come directly to the police, go to a counsellor, go to someone as an intermediary. But what ultimately we'd like them to come to the police, but I understand that that's not always going to be easy for them, and it might be they use a third party to come to the police.
And that was Detective Inspector Scott Baird talking to our reporter Nita Blake-Person. Now let's take a complete change in direction. Wellingtonians are already dreaming up their first food orders as the capital prepares for an overnight alert level drop. While level 3 has infamously become known as level 4 with takeaways, not everyone is choosing to open up this time around. And for businesses that are, they're seemingly more COVID-19 cautious than ever. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Samuel Rilstone have more.
They say you can't beat Wellington on a good day, and even as the clouds rolled in to block some Oriental Bay sunshine, knowing the capital was moving to alert level 3 tomorrow was good enough for some people.
At least I don't need to cook it anymore. I can get takeaway, delivery, things like that.
Well, we were just literally talking about it before. We want to support local. Yeah.
People recognise the shift down to level 3 doesn't change much for them unless they work in hospitality or trades. But for many, the move is helping them see the light at the end of the lockdown tunnel.
Yeah, it is a small change for us, but I think it's a very big change for some of the businesses. And, to the extent we can, we'll help and support them as we can through that change.
Yeah, we're in a pretty good place where we don't have young children. I really feel for the people who are both trying to work from home and handle their children, the preschoolers.
I think as long as we get out the house and go for a walk, we're good. We're staying with my family, so that it's just like a bit of a crowded house.
Kate Marinkovic has spent the day readying her Mount Victoria cake shop Tomboy for contactless orders.
I feel like I've hit the ground running a little bit, but yes, I think we're all good.
Ms Marinkovic thinks operating at level 3 is a large team effort between her and other small businesses operating throughout the city. A nearby cafe is delivering fresh bread for her to make sandwiches, and a local wholesaler has helped her secure some fresh yeast.
I mean, even through social media, I've had some really wonderful pushes from other businesses who aren't going to open for for level 3, but just encouraging people to sort of support local and small businesses.
Ms Marinkovic is aware some businesses are choosing not to open for this round of level 3. She thinks it's smart if that's an option amidst the risk of the Delta strain. But opening Tomboy up is a necessity for her to pay the bills and to keep the business afloat, which she's confident her loyal customer base will help see through.
Yeah, we do rely heavily on our local customers, and it's going to be a bit different. I mean, the cake side of our business is huge, and so because people are at home, they're sort of baking a lot more, so that sort of tends to drop off. So if we can offer things like the donuts and the coffee and nice sandwiches, then that should sort of help tie us over until we get down to level 2 and back to level 1.
There's also the food producers, providing hospitality businesses with their ingredients, like Shoots Microgreens. Wellington General Manager Remy Morris says providing for hospitality makes up a large portion of business. But she says while they've done some deliveries, it's been a bit quiet, and she thinks businesses have realised it's easier to wait for level 2.
I think this time round, in comparison to last year, a lot fewer businesses are going for the level 3 takeaway option. I definitely saw a lot of places last year that were a little bit desperate to be able to get back into the rhythm of things and do what they could.
Either way, level 3 is a delight for those opening and their customers too. Some already trying to choose what they'll be tucking into tomorrow night.
I think we're thinking of Lucky Chicken. Yeah. Can't go wrong.
A culinary treat to ease the burden of our COVID battle.
And Jake and Sam's video will go up on our Facebook page if you want to check it out. A lot of you generously saying that you would give up your vaccinations in the meantime for needy Aucklanders. Di says, as long as we here in Taranaki are COVID-free, happy to delay my second vax to free it up for Aucklanders.
Ahiahi Marie, RNZ News at 6, ko Sarah Thompson tōko ingoa. Police checkpoints on Auckland's southern boundaries will be up and running before the clock turns midnight as the country south of the city enters alert level 3. Only people with exemptions to travel for essential reasons will be waved through the checkpoints. Superintendent Shannon Gray told RNZ there is little room for leniency.
We're not going to be lenient. We're going to obviously still educate people where we're turning them around. We don't want to move to enforcing people who are trying to push through the borders. But obviously, if it's absolutely blatant, then maybe we need to go down that path.
Shannon Gray says there will be separate lanes for freight at the checkpoints. Auckland Council says it has resources on standby for anyone who needs shelter after flooding in West Auckland overnight. The suburbs of Kumeu, Ranui and Henderson Valley have been particularly hard hit by heavy rain and high winds. More than 50 homes have been evacuated. The council says help is available at local community centres. Meanwhile, a section of State Highway 16 in Helensville has closed this afternoon due to flooding. Surf lifeguards rescued 11 people, including a 70-year-old woman, from floodwaters today. Mairanga Bay lifeguards say volunteers had to make their way through floodwaters containing hidden trees and fences to reach the woman's property off Oraha Road this afternoon. The woman was carried to an inflatable rescue boat. Earlier, 2 men were rescued by Muriwai lifeguards from sheds at Tapu Road. One of the men had been trapped in waist-high water since last night. Meanwhile, insurance company IAG has received more than 320 claims relating to the overnight flooding in West Auckland. It says most were for home insurance, followed by contents and private motor vehicles. The company expects the number of claims to rise. A corrections officer at Spring Hill Prison in Waikato has tested positive for COVID-19. All 123 inmates are being tested and their unit is now in quarantine. 23 staff members who had contact with the worker are isolating and getting tested. Amy Williams reports.
The prison's director, Scott Walker, says the staff member tested positive last night. He confirmed the worker lives in Auckland, is fully vaccinated and has not had any symptoms. Mr Walker says they worked at the prison on Saturday and that evening were linked to a recent location of interest. He says the worker immediately self-isolated and got tested on Sunday. Mr Walker says a small number of men that were in the unit and have been released are being contacted and advised to isolate and get tested.
Police investigating the discovery of a baby's body at an Auckland recycling plant are reviewing CCTV footage from about 100 trucks to see how it ended up there. The baby girl was found just over 2 weeks ago and police have yet to identify her or her mother. Detective Inspector Scott Baird says they still don't know how she came to be at the Onehunga facility.
We're having to look at the recycling plant and the trucks that come into that plant, look at the CCTV that's there, and that's taken some time with over 100 trucks coming in that day. But obviously we're having to prioritise around the timing of those trucks and then work out the routes where their pickups have been that day.
Scott Baird is encouraging anyone with information about the baby to contact police. Government ministers have come under intense questioning about why New Zealand failed to evacuate everyone who needed to escape from Afghanistan. New Zealand's emergency mission was abandoned after last week's attack on Kabul airport, leaving hundreds stranded. Nearly 400 people have been evacuated, but there are still 365 in Afghanistan, around 100 of whom are New Zealand citizens or permanent residents. National leader Judith Collins condemned the government's recent actions.
And it's concerning that the government seems to have been caught so unprepared. It is a stain on our work in Afghanistan. The political situation in Afghanistan has moved quickly, but it should have been no surprise that something like this would happen.
It's 6:04. An economist says certainty and cash flow is the best medicine for any economic slowdown caused by COVID-19 lockdowns. New Zealand Institute of Economic Research principal economist Christina Leong says the lockdown has abruptly halted Aotearoa's robust economic recovery from previous restrictions. But she says the economy has proven to bounce back when fed by government support.
So as long as there are these support measures in place and there is that cash flow that keeps flowing through the economy, then businesses can keep workers employed. And with that, with the strong labour market, we will have that household confidence flowing through to spending.
Christina Leong says certainty is the best medicine for struggling businesses in times like these. Moving now into sport, swimmer Sophie Pascoe continues her quest for her first gold medal of the Tokyo Paralympics tonight when she contests the final of the 100 metres freestyle S9. Pascoe won her heat but was several seconds outside her best time and finishing third fastest qualifier for the final at 10:15 tonight. Sprinter Anna Stephen has sneaked into tonight's T64 200 metres final, grabbing the 8th and last qualifying spot with a personal best time. This afternoon, William Steadman won a second Paralympic medal in less than 24 hours, finishing third in the men's T36 400 metres. It's a repeat of the bronze medal he won in the same event in Rio in 2016. Steadman won a silver medal in the T36 long jump last night and says that took a toll. Andy Murray produced his best tennis in 4 injury-disrupted years, but fell short of beating Greek world number 3 Stefanos Tsitsipas in the first round of the US Open. The former world number 1 led by 2-1, but eventually went down 6-4 in the deciding 5th set. Murray, now ranked 112th in the world, was irritated by the Greek's 8-minute bathroom break before the final set, believing it was a stalling tactic.
I'm not saying I necessarily win that match for sure, but it had influence on what was happening. I rate him a lot. I think he's a brilliant player and I think he's great for the game. But I have zero time for that stuff at all, and I lost respect for him.
Meanwhile, women's defending champ Naomi Osaka overcame a slow start to win her opening match in straight sets. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, our military historian Damien Fenton remembers the South American War, which almost wiped Paraguay off the map. Tony Stamp samples debut albums from Dunedin, Canada, and the UK dance producer Joy Orbison. Any relation, I wonder? And we thought it was high time for a South Auckland Samoan Kiwi perspective on that city's current level 4 lockdown. Raymond Sangapotatelli is our man. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7. On RNZ National.
Te reo irirangi o Aotearoa, funded through New Zealand On Air. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāpa Wednesday. Northland, isolated showers. Rain gradually spreading north tonight with some heavy and possibly thundery falls. For Auckland and Coromandel, showers easing tonight, partly cloudy with isolated showers tomorrow. For Waikato, Waitomo, Taumaranui, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, scattered rain clearing by this evening and fine breaks increasing. For Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape, fine. For Gisborne to Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with isolated showers. For Marlborough, fine spells increasing tonight and fine tomorrow. And for the remainder of the South Island, mostly fine with overnight frost or fog in some places. However, a few showers about Western Fiordland turning to rain late tomorrow, with scattered falls spreading to Southland and parts of Otago from tomorrow evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and the odd shower. That concludes the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Rāpa Wednesday. It's now 8 minutes past 6.
Nā mihi Sarah, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. At midnight tonight, some Waikato residents will become honorary Jaffas, whether they like it or not, when the COVID borders are locked in and everyone south of Auckland drops into alert level 3. Being co-opted into the super city means 2 more weeks at level 4, while some of their neighbours, like neighbours just across the street, will be busted down a level to level 3. So how does that actually work? Well, joining me now is Waikato District Mayor Alan Sanson. Alan, welcome to Auckland. You're a Jaffa, it appears.
Thanks, Lisa. No, I'm not a Jaffa. I definitely live in the heart of the Waikato, so I'm south of that border.
So what do you make of chunks of the Waikato district being sort of annexed into Auckland for the purposes of alert levels?
Oh, look, this is a pretty practical approach to an issue we've got. I think the one thing a lot of people don't understand is a lot of the people in the northern part of our district, from Mercer, Pokeno, Tuakau, Port Waikato, Onehunga and those communities out there, they take their services from the northern part in that sort of South Auckland area, being Pukekohe and alike. So this sort of makes sense that they actually are part of Auckland for this exercise. So, it is very much in line with what we had in February last year.
Alan,
this year, I should say.
Yeah. Alan, do you reckon the attitude will change slightly, though, if, for example, Auckland is stuck at level 4 and at some point the rest of the country moves to level 2, then might they want to be opting out of the Auckland region?
Yeah, I suppose that may cause a few issues in a couple of weeks if the government lobs another week or two on to you. So if we were looking at 3 to 4 weeks, I think that may create some issues for some people. But in saying that, I think everybody's pretty mature about this. Nobody wants it to move out of the epicentre of Auckland, so we have to do what we have to do to make sure we stay safe and secure.
There's a couple of weird scenarios, right? Mercer, where they've got a road that's split down the middle, where literally neighbours could throw a cupcake at each other, but one's going to be in level 3 and the other one's going to be in level 4. Was there much consultation about that, and what do you make of that?
Okay, so a lot of that discussion came out of what is known as Kiriroa Road, but in actual fact it is the whole boundary. So if you go east or west from Mercer up through Pukekohe, Glenmurray and out through the Waikato Valley, it runs in the middle of the road all the way through, so it's not unique just to that particular road.
So you've got a big, massive, long road, Alan, just so that we can visualise this. You've got a big, massive, long road where neighbours on one side of the white line will be in one district and others on the opposite side are in another for alert levels.
Yeah, I know, and this is the piece that I've been talking at the PM's office for since last Saturday morning, and I made the point that I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. It's either you put them in or you take them out. And I didn't mind them being in on level 4, but everybody on the road, for a common sense approach, would be on level 4. So when they rang me again this morning to talk to me about a number of other issues, I raised the question, okay, so I live on one of these roads and I just happen to be on level 3 on my side. So I come out of my driveway, go across the road, I'm in level 4. So you're saying that I shouldn't be crossing the boundary, and I've got to say it took them a little while to think about that before they came back to me. But I think in discussions I've had with the police today, police are going to treat these roads as everybody being on level 4. So my message to the wider community in these areas is make sure you carry 2 things. One is a level of something to be able to identify yourself, and that can be a driver's licence, a firearms licence, or a passport, or something that's got both your name and photo on. The second thing is carry something that identifies your address within that area. So that can be a rates bill, a power bill, a water bill, any bill that actually associates you to the address as to where you live. And then I think the police will actually look at that, realising that there is some issues around the people that are on the fringes, and will treat you accordingly and help you where they can.
Well, Alan, you're looking on the bright side of life there, because that really sounds like a recipe for disaster, potentially. So when you raised it with the Prime Minister's office, did they not listen to you? Because they've obviously gone ahead with this situation.
Look, I don't want to bag the people in the PM's office. They've been very, very cooperative and good to work with, but they're not the final decision makers. I would suggest that when you read the health order, which the government signed off on late yesterday afternoon, early evening last night, it's written in real legal speak, and I'd suggest that it's been written and the position has been swayed by the legal side of it. So I think that's probably where the issue lies, is the lawyers determined the middle of the road to be the boundary and not the road itself in its entirety and its residents. So
Alan,
there lies a problem.
Alan, you said they wanted to talk to you about a few other issues as well. What other issues have you got?
Oh, look, we have a number of issues, just making sure that people are supported, making sure that I'm talking with the police. Most of these borders have been managed by counties Manukau. The Waikato police are doing the northbound traffic on State Highway 1 at Mercer, but the other roadblocks and the roving police, and there is quite a number of roving police 24/7 on the backcountry roads. Just to make sure that I was connecting with them and offering support to them where I can, offering a bit of information where I can. So there's just a whole number of things we talk about, but it's fair to say the staff in the PM's office have been very good to work with. I think they very much, and I don't want to get them in the cart here, but I think they very much saw what I was talking about, but they are not the decision makers.
Alan, last time there was some major traffic nail-ups, right, and some pretty big teething problems. Have you got confidence that this time round it's not going to be a repeat of what some people thought was, well, pretty much a dog's breakfast?
Look, I think one of the issues is, and I spoke to media a couple of times this afternoon about this, look, the roadblocks are already up at Mercer, so if anybody thinks they're going for a tiki tour into the Waikato, those days are over. What I'd suggest, unless you have a piece of paper that gives you identification as an essential worker to cross that boundary, don't even bother coming over the Bombays. And this was what happened last time. I think there was too many people thought they had a God-given right to just cross the border, and they didn't. And the police will turn you around again. So my message is this time, if you don't have a justified piece of paper in your hand that says that you have the right to cross it because you're an essential worker, don't even bother trying.
Hey, Alan, before you go, happy alert level 3, and sort of the question on my mind here is, do you have a hankering for anything in particular that you're going to contactless purchase,
No.
You're not lining up for takeaways, Alan?
No, I don't. Wife and I don't have much, but I've got to say though, my wife's got a very, very, very special birthday actually on Sunday. So Sam, we're going into level 3. Our daughter and son-in-law and grandkids are coming out for dinner, and they intend on getting a bit of Thai takeaway and bringing that out. So that might be a taste of takeaway.
Thank you for your time, Alan. That is Waikato District Mayor Alan Sanson. Auckland businesses are screaming out for more financial support from the government as they face an extended stint in lockdown. The government has provided a one-off resurgence subsidy to help with fixed overheads such as rent. But lockdown-weary businesses in the big smoke, who are facing at least another 2 weeks at alert level 4, say this isn't enough, with more than 15,000 signing a petition calling on the government to lend a helping hand. Jean Bell reports.
Matthew Koshi is the owner and managing director of Meltrons, an Auckland engineering company with a team of 5 that sells industrial scales and other equipment. The last 2 weeks have chilled the business's bounce back from previous lockdowns. Mr Koshi isn't taking a wage for himself, and he's dipping into reserves to pay the bills.
We have seen our revenue drop by about 80%, not being able to operate, obviously, except for only essential services. Going from a strong July and strong first half of August, we're just decimated by the 2 weeks of lockdown.
Mr Koshi supports the government's call to put the country into lockdown, and his business can suck up a week or two under Alert Level 4. But he urges that they need a helping hand through the financial fallout that comes under a longer stint.
But now that it's been extended for another 2 weeks, this is where it's really hitting us hard. The issue for business owners is that the wage subsidy barely covers our staff's wages, let alone any wage for ourselves. And then you've got all the costs that we are facing, including, our rent and utilities, insurance payments, hire purchase, plant and equipment costs. These continue to run, and we can't put these costs off.
Matthew Koshi wants to see the resurgent subsidy extended and dished out on a weekly basis, with the amount depending on the business's individual circumstances and income. His signature is among the more than 15,000 business owners who have signed the Auckland Chamber of Commerce petition calling on the government to extend the resurgent subsidy. Auckland Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive Michael Barnett says Matthew Koshi's company is not the only business struggling out there.
If you look at many of them, they came out of 2020, their balance sheet has been depleted, they've been in recovery mode, just getting going again, and now they're back under pressure. So these are really tough times for business.
He praises the wage subsidy as a way of helping employees, but he thinks those doing the employing also need help.
The rent, the rates, the electricity, the Wi-Fi, the hire purchase, somebody has to keep paying those. We're not asking government to pay all of it. We're asking them to meet a share. They're asking business to shut down, but they're expected to be there to employ and be there to keep the economy started again in a couple of weeks.
New Zealand Institute of Economic Research principal economist Christina Leung says the lockdown has abruptly halted Auckland's robust economic recovery from previous restrictions. But she says the economy has proven to bounce back when fed by government support.
So as long as there are these support measures in place and there is that cash flow that keeps flowing through the economy, then businesses can keep workers employed. And with that, with the strong labour market, we will have that household confidence flowing through to spending.
She says certainty is the best medicine for struggling businesses in times like these. In a statement, Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the government is continuing to look at whether additional support through the resurgent subsidy is needed, particularly as higher alert levels are in place. He says the wage subsidy, leave support scheme and short-term absence payment are available to businesses as appropriate.
The government's response to the collapse of Afghanistan has been described in Parliament as a stain on the work this country's done there over many years. Ministers faced lengthy questioning today about why so many Afghans were not helped to escape earlier and what's happening to those left behind. Our political editor Jane Patterson has more.
Celebration from the ruling Taliban with the withdrawal of the last foreign troops. But heartbreak and frustration for many Afghan families left behind, now fearing for their life. Defence Minister Penny Henare told a parliamentary committee while the military operation is finished, efforts to get more people out are not.
We are not turning our backs on those still in Afghanistan. We will continue to see how we can support these seeking to leave Afghanistan.
Opposition MPs expressed their condolences to those either killed or still trapped in Afghanistan and their condemnation of the government's response.
The fact that we were forced to leave behind many of our Afghan allies, people who risked their lives to support our defence and police personnel, is extremely concerning. As a humanitarian crisis of historic proportions happening in Afghanistan. And it's concerning that the government seems to have been caught so unprepared. It is a stain on our work in Afghanistan.
The Minister on Defence.
The fall of the Afghanistan government has occurred far quicker than any of the intelligence predicted.
National leader Judith Collins asked Penny Henare how many New Zealand citizens remained in Afghanistan.
A number of the evacuees are still being processed, and the numbers will be clear on who exactly was evacuated. From there, we'll have a better sense of who was left behind.
Minister, are you saying that you don't know if any New Zealand citizens have been left behind? If you don't know, can you tell us? Otherwise, can you just tell us how many have been left behind?
Mr. Speaker, I'll reiterate my answer that the numbers that were evacuated from Afghanistan are still being processed by our officials.
Just hours before, however, Mr Henare had talked about the nearly 400 people who'd been evacuated. More than 700 people had been registered with the Foreign Ministry, including New Zealand citizens, permanent residents and visa holders. MFAT's Chris Seed said about 365 were still there.
And of those 51, the best of our knowledge, 51 are identified as New Zealand citizens and 52 as New Zealand permanent residents.
As part of the urgent response to the collapse of Afghanistan to the Taliban, Cabinet set new and broader criteria on August the 16th for those to be evacuated on the planned Defence Force mission. Foreign Minister Nanaia Mahuta told the committee Cabinet seeking more advice about what a second phase might look like.
For Cabinet to understand what are the challenges of a second stage set of approaches towards resettling refugees and what are the implications for New Zealand, so very much a New Zealand focus.
Chief of Defence Force Air Marshal Kevin Short explained why last week's terror attack meant 2 further planned evacuation flights had to be abandoned.
The withdrawal of the medical support that was being provided at Kabul airport. Some of the gate controls were being closed because of the crowding and security issues. The evacuation handling systems were shutting down as well. And in fact, we needed the Australian support for that and also the threats.
And more bad news today for one group of Afghans trapped in Kabul who have had a last-minute legal bid turned down by the High Court. The group applied for an urgent injunction on Friday, asking the court to rule on Immigration New Zealand's decision to stop processing visas. Justice Cook has declined the application, saying he was satisfied their plight had been considered by ministers.
And the slimmed down and socially distanced Parliament has begun sitting in person today for the first time under Alert Level 4. Labor wanted Parliament to sit virtually instead, but both National and ACT have insisted on a physical gathering. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Back in the building and back to business. The opposition claiming today as a victory.
It is good to have our Parliament back.
We were never going to give up.
It's the first time Parliament has sat under Alert Level 4, a streamlined operation with a handful of MPs in the debating chamber masked up and spaced out.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave for the House to re-establish the Epidemic Response Committee on the same terms as it resolved on March 25 last year.
Is there any objection to that taking place? Yes, there is.
The Epidemic Response Committee was set up during Level 4 last year, chaired by the then National leader Simon Bridges over Zoom. But Labor will not entertain its return. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has proposed an alternative, a modified question time held virtually, but both National and ACT objected.
We offered a solution in our view that meant that they could hold us to account, that we could have that scrutiny just without having to do it face-to-face. And I am disappointed they didn't take up that option.
National's leader Judith Collins flew down from Auckland to take part, and at least 4 more of her MPs travelled from around the country. She says a virtual parliament was untested and unsuitable. She had zero confidence her party would be treated fairly.
It is time for answers and honesty. We will not tolerate spin and smiles. This is a deadly serious business.
We're asking everyone around New Zealand to try and adapt in the way that they worked, to do as safely possible in a Level 4 environment. And my view was that there were ways that we could do that too.
ACT's David Seymour says that's hypocritical, one rule for the Prime Minister, another for the opposition. He says if it was truly unsafe, Jacinda Ardern would not be holding daily media conferences in person. Furthermore, he says she would have requested Parliament be suspended altogether, as she did last week.
The Prime Minister has used bogus public health concerns that she clearly does not herself hold in order to play politics, and unfortunately it's difficult to describe that as anything other than despicable.
Mr Seymour has based himself in Wellington since the lockdown, and he alone will attend Parliament on behalf of ACT. Not all of the parties were represented today. Both the Greens and the Māori Party chose to stay away, both scathing in their assessment of the opposition.
It's absolutely irresponsible. I mean, it literally risks people's lives.
I have never seen such disgusting behaviour at the cost of people's well-being.
The alert level drops to 3 in Wellington tomorrow, and the Greens will send one MP to take part in proceedings. The opposition have got what they wanted, their moment on the stage. The pressure is now on for them to perform.
Let's get to some of your feedback before we head off. And wow, your generosity, everyone living out of Auckland, and kindness. This is on the issue of whether Auckland should be prioritised for vaccination. Andrew from the mainland says, "Hi Checkpoint, I would give my upcoming Pfizer dose to an Aucklander if Aucklanders promise not to visit their outer suburb, Queenstown, until we are all safe." Murray's got in touch to say, in Christchurch, happy to send vaccines to the needy, wherever and whoever they be. Bernie reckons we in Christchurch should definitely wait until all in Auckland have received their vaccine. I remember and will always be grateful for the support we received a few years ago when destruction was ours. Much of that support was from Aucklanders. Waiting in line is the least we can do, says Bernie. Another person says, in Wellington, with one jab, and would be happy for Aucklanders to get priority. The impact of them having to lock down for longer is felt by all of us, and not just economically. We need them to get through this for all of us, as long as our essential workers, including dairy owners, get theirs too, says Nikki. You're a kind bunch of people. This Aucklander says waiting lists for Auckland vaccine bookings are up to 6 weeks out. Other parts of the country seem to be very short. Wellington seems to be a week or two. It is desperately unfair. This is our 6th lockdown due to level 3 and 4. Of course, Auckland should get more vaccines. It will protect the rest of the country. Aucklanders like me are feeling so gutted and tired, this person says. On the borders that come into play at 11:59 p.m. tonight, who says a border must go down the middle of the road? The police spokesperson is only following instructions. Why didn't someone decide before this outbreak that a particular road is either in or outside of Auckland? That from John, who says boundaries don't run down the middle of roads. That's all we've got time for. Don't forget to tune in to First Up tomorrow at 5 a.m. They're going to be talking to cafe owners preparing to open.
Kia ora tātou, RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Ko Sarah Thompson, tōko ingoa. Police say they will not be lenient at border checkpoints as Auckland stays in level 4 lockdown and everyone south moves